Hey guys, in this video I want to show you how to load custom firmware on your retro arcade mini, also known as the RS-07. A version of the custom firmware was released for this device a couple of weeks ago. This is the first version, so there will be, of course, more improvements and updates in the future. In this video, I'll show you how to flash the firmware to a micro SD card and then replace the original one that's in the RS-07. I'll have links to the firmware as well as all the tools you need in the description of this video, so check that out. Anyways, let's get started. The first thing we're going to need is another micro SD card. You could flash the micro SD card that's in the RS-07 already, but I would not recommend doing that because it's always nice to have a backup. So get another one, preferably one that is around 4 gigabytes at least. We're not actually going to load any ROMs onto this one, just the operating system. So 4 gigabytes should do it. We're actually going to put the ROMs onto another micro SD card that you'll stick into the external card reader. So download the latest custom firmware for the RS-07 and write it to your micro SD card. I'm using Win32 Disk Imager. And you can also use Etcher as well, but Win32 is always the one that I prefer to use anyways on a Windows system. If you have a Mac system, Etcher would work as well. And the process here takes several minutes depending on the speed of your micro SD card and your card reader, etc., and your computer. Anyways, once this completes, you want to take this out and then we're going to install this into your RS-07. To replace the micro SD card that's in the RS-07, we have to take it apart. So remove these 4 rubber pads on the bottom, and then there should be 4 screws on the bottom. The 2 at the top you don't have to touch, but another thing you want to do is take out the battery. After that, you want to maybe twist it a bit to get the 2 halves to come apart. And be careful because there are 2 cables here that connect the top to the bottom. So what I would recommend is that you remove them. There's actually a little tab that you can push and then these cables come off. So just flick up these tabs that are holding the cables in carefully. So after removing the cables, we're only concerned with the bottom half of it. And the micro SD card is right here under this piece of foam tape. And you want to carefully remove that because this little piece of tape actually holds the micro SD card in and it prevents it from, I guess, coming out. And you want to slide that out, and we're going to keep this because like I said, it's a good idea to have a backup of the original operating system. So if you don't have one, yeah, then I guess you can write to it, but I have a few spares kicking around, so I'm going to take this original one out and I'm just going to keep it somewhere safe. With the new micro SD card we flashed with the custom firmware, we're going to install it into the slot here, and we're going to carefully put it in, and then at the same time we're going to put this piece of tape back on so that it doesn't fall out. And yeah, that's pretty much it. And now what you have to do is put everything back together. So with the original micro SD card, I just taped it to the bottom of the device here just in case I ever want to revert to the original stock firmware. I can always just plug it in. After installing the micro SD card, we're going to put everything back together, the 4 screws and the 4 rubber feet on the bottom of the RS-07. So to load ROMs onto the unit now, what we're going to use is the external micro SD card slot. And I have one here that has a bunch of ROMs already installed on here. Just make sure that it's formatted in FAT32 and you can load NES, Super Nintendo, Game Boy Advance, Neo Geo, etc. onto there. And after you do that, we can fire up the unit. Now it's time to power it on, and if everything went according to plan, it should power up with the that boot screen with the fish. And then we're going to zoom in really quickly here so you can get a better view of it. This is the new interface now. This is very familiar to you if you have an RS-97 or various other similar devices that run this type of custom firmware. And I'm going to zoom out a little bit more so you can see the buttons, see what I'm pressing. So these 2 buttons here will switch between the tabs. So that's the apps, emulators, and that's probably the one that we're more concerned about is the emulator tab. So now I'll quickly demo the new custom firmware and try out some of these emulators. So let's try out the Nintendo one, and you want to hit the B button to select it. And since we have some ROMs installed on the external micro SD card, you want to go to EXT and hit B, and then you should scroll to your folder which has the ROMs, and then you want to hit B again, and then go to NES, and let's see which game we could try here. So let's try Galaga out here, one of my favorite games, and it emulates Nintendo games pretty well. I'd say it's like 100% accuracy here. So I don't really notice any slowdowns or anything, so it works pretty well. And to access the menu here to change stuff, I think you hit one of the yellow button or something. No, it's the red button here, and then you can go in here and change various things. So I'm gonna just enable the on-screen frame rate. So I'm gonna go show FPS, and I'm gonna hit back, and I want to save this as my default. So we're gonna go save config as default, and that should do it. So from now on I should be able to see the frame rate on the screen on the top right there. So that worked out. And let's try something else here. Now I'm gonna try out a Super Nintendo game here. This is Final Fight, and let's see how it performs. I'm gonna turn on the frame rate if I can first. So let's go to settings here and go show FPS, and I think you hit right to turn it on. And then we're gonna save this as a global setting so that I don't have to do this for every game. And then let's go back in here and show you what the performance is like with the frame rate. So there is a little bit of a drop whenever I play Super Nintendo games. So this device isn't 100% perfect in terms of emulation for Super Nintendo, but it's pretty decent. Performance wise, it's pretty in line with all the other gaming devices that use the same kind of CPU. And as this firmware is more developed for the RS-07, there will be more improvements, etc. for it. So to exit, you want to hit the select and start, and then hit the B button. Now I'm going to try out F-Zero for the Super Nintendo. Again, performance-wise, there's a little bit of a drop in frame rate, but still playable. So F-Zero was always one of my favorite games on the Super Nintendo. It plays a lot better with a gamepad, and on here you can see the frame rate drops by 50%, so not the greatest, but still playable. Hopefully, as the firmware matures, maybe there's optimizations in terms of the emulators available for it so that it can run a lot quicker. So that's it for F-Zero. Now it's time to try out Final Burn Alpha, which is a really good emulator for Neo Geo games and CPS1 and CPS2. So let's try out Neo Geo. I'm pretty sure this will perform a lot better than the stock firmware. Let's try out Samurai Showdown 2, which is one of my favorite Neo Geo games. And as it's loading, you will get some error messages because there may be missing a ROM or two, but just hit any key and it should go through. Hit select to insert coin, and then you want to hit start for player 1, and then select your player. And I have to say it works pretty well. Performance wise, I didn't notice any slowdown or anything, so it ran really well. So Neo Geo games play a lot better with this custom firmware and Final Burn Alpha. And to access the emulator settings, what you want to do is hit start and select. And from here you can exit the game. Now let's try another game. Let's try Mark of the Wolves, another one of my favorite fighting games for the Neo Geo. And the load times are pretty long, but I'm going to speed through this so that you don't have to wait. And like I said, you may have to press a key or two to skip some of the errors. And insert coin and start. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed this video. That's how you install the custom firmware onto the Retro Arcade Mini or the RS-97. I'll have links to all the tools and where you can buy the RS-07 in the description of this video. Like always, if you like my videos and you want to see more of it, subscribe and leave comments and likes and whatnot. And I will see you in the next video.